let's move on to the next topic about Comic-Con and
Yeah.
events and how these spectacles, these conferences have become like these tentpole
Hmm.
must be at events, right?
Yeah.
Um, for these reasons, right? Where it's like that people are going, it's going to be the fans of the fans, you have the critics, everybody's kind of there, you get the actors and everybody, to like present the best things that are going to come out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was Comic Con last year, but which was the event that had like the director's chairs of like the art, Thor coming back and
That was
Captain
separate.
America.
That
Oh,
was
okay,
like
okay, okay.
the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay, got
That
it.
was like a video campaign for them to announce Doomsday was coming. And then it was like, was it like an hour long video of like
Yeah,
they just turned the chair, they just kept adding a chair with a name. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, but the point that I'm trying to make is that is what I equate with Marvel these days at like Comic Con and like events, right? Where it's like you're just kind of rehashing what worked for you before and
Yeah.
try to, bring that back and not trying to make room for, all the characters to come back. Like, right? Wanda, I would love to see Wanda come back, right?
I think they're all coming back for Battle World. I
Mhm.
think that Doomsday, because Doomsday is very much Empire Strikes Back. They're gonna lose.
Mm,
Like they're gonna lose. He's
okay.
gonna create Battle World, and then that opens up Secret Wars, and then Secret Wars is gonna have literally everybody because you basically have like the teams fighting against you. It's like Civil War on steroids,
Oh,
where
okay.
you have like the teams fighting each other. Because basically Doom creates a planet where basically everyone's fighting each other. And so that's when you're going to see all that. That's when I think everyone's going to come back. So I think like Wand is going to be shown at the very end.
Mm.
Um, and I hope they don't do her relationship with Doom like they do in the comics. I absolutely don't want to see that, but like it is what it is. Um, but I think that's where everyone's coming. I think you're going to have a select group here, and
Mm.
then you're going to have
So
like
what is
everyone
that?
show
The
up.
the
The
after
Secret
credit
Wars,
film or whatever.
yeah,
What will
Battle
be that
World,
again?
and then Secret Wars, yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. So it just kind of seems like a rehashing of like old movies or things that we've already, seen.
yeah.
Um, but at least there was some like, interesting stuff, right? Like Ryan Gosling was announced as Ghost Rider,
I
right?
was
And
excited
I like that they kind of paired that back to the conversation he had with the podcast host that
with
like,
Josh. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, with Josh Horowitz, who went to Kevin Feige and was like, Ryan Gosling wants to be like Ghost Rider. And then like Kevin Feige's like, we want to make room for Ryan Gosling. And so that's kind of like how it happened. It's just like, how
yeah,
cool is that you can tie this back to like a fan moment, right? To
yeah.
like the actor and being like the middleman between that. And then they announced David Johnson as the new Black Panther. So that's
Great
like also
choice.
really cool.
Great choice.
Right? Who's having a moment after doing the long walk.
Yeah.
And being one of those like new faces, so that
Mhm.
part of it was like super interesting. And I think the other one that I was like really super excited about was Apple TV announcing Neuromancer,
Mhm. Yep.
because it like is showing how much like Apple TV is like we have found our lane with like science fiction and like
Yeah.
fantasy and like book worlds.
Yeah.
I also like feel like they're like a company that I trust because
Mhm.
they have
Yeah.
made that, storytelling and craft be such a factor into like what they're putting in. There are some quibbles here and there with like foundation of like whether it's like, really sticking to the book. But
In their defense, it's hard to stick to that book.
right,
That
right,
book
right,
is
right,
out
right.
there. It's kind of like Dune. It's some like there's a reason
Exactly.
why Denis Villeneuve is only doing is like ending at Messiah because it
Hmm.
goes off. The books go off the rails after that. There's no way he could like do it with a straight face after that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's where it's like, at least I know that they have a vision or that they are
Yeah.
allowing artists or creators to have a vision, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's like a thing where you know for me, like if these studios want to go back to like bringing people back, like that's what they have to do is like allow the artists and creators to have these visions.
Yeah.
But it's like interesting to me that they are using like events to like announce these things, that it has just become fully a part of how you're promoting your work. The other
Yeah.
one that I wanted to mention was the Fanatics Fest, which
Hmm.
had 200,000 attendees and 500 athlete appearances. Tom Brady, Justin Bieber, Shaq, Jay-Z all showed up. Um, And this has like been a growing event that is being put on by like Fanatics, right? That's like a sports, athletics brand that has been doing it, long enough now that like they have the cachet to actually start bringing in like those like
Mhm.
superstar names and the fans together. And I think that like a thing that like I want to, have kind of be like a lesson for people here is that like fans want to be close to the things and people that they love. And
Yeah.
the more that like companies can try to do this as like a way to make it more natural, where it's like, yeah, you're going to have these like really cool moments that's like are, will bring attention to themselves, right? It's like people are going to make announcements here. You're going to have, celebrities participating in ways that they wouldn't. Makes it like really interesting. Like one of the companies I love is The Ringer, right? So it's like they hosted a panel at like Comic-Con this year, and like this has been like a long-standing thing where it's like they actually are usually they would have done it as like a podcast, but this time they're like it's not going to be a podcast. It's just we're doing the event as we're doing the panel as like a standalone event, right? So it's like now you're starting to have these like I don't want to say it's like gatekeeping, but it kind of is, right? Where it's like only the
Yeah.
people that go there are participating, right? So it's
Yeah.
like but you have to give the people that are participating and are making the trek to go out there a way to like experience things differently and separately. Like we had this
Yeah.
conversation now where it's like, the Super Bowl and like the World Cup and like all these like sports events that people go to, like the Super Bowl show is no longer for the people in the stadium. It's filmed
Yeah.
for the people that are watching on TV, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, how do you flip that and make it so that the people that actually attend feel special in some way and that
Yeah.
they, like we were talking earlier, them spending that money is worth it for them,
Yeah.
So that's like a way to like kind of think about it. It's like, what are these industry events that like we want to like hold up and make sure that we put money behind
Yeah.
so that like it actually makes it worth it for everybody, the people participating, but then also like the fans that are using, are paying for these tickets.
Yeah. No, I think that also goes back to the Odyssey too, though. I think
Hmm.
and versus the Moana 2 thing is I think with AI and everything else that we're seeing right now, everything else that we're experiencing is we want the real. And there's
Hmm.
nothing more real than being in a room with somebody and having your favorite actor in front of you or having your favorite creator. So like I went to GalaxyCon Richmond last year with actually it was probably earlier this year. It was earlier this year. This year has been crazy. Um with my
What
daughter and
is
my family.
GalaxyCon?
GalaxyCon, it's like a locational it's a Comic-Con basically.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a comic book convention. There's all this other stuff. So we got to see like some of the members of Jurassic Park and Edgar Wright was there. And they had like all these other panels. We went specifically because my daughter loves The Flash and they had a lot of the actors from the Flash TV show. It was like a panel one day. So I just remember like we were in line as soon as we could and we immediately got there so she could have a good
Hmm.
seat so she could have that moment
Nice.
and be really
Hmm.
close to them. Um, but also you have opportunities to connect. I mean, we want a third place. We want to connect with not
Yes.
only our peers, but we want to connect with the people that we are excited about. So like for me, I got to meet Chris Claremont at GalaxyCon Richmond, and he
Hmm.
signed my Dark Phoenix,
Yeah.
my copy of Dark Phoenix. And so being able to say, like, your work is one of my favorite pieces of literature, not even comics, like of
Hmm.
literature. And I need you to know how important it is and how much you are appreciated while he's signing it. And like my husband's taping the whole thing, but that only exists in these little pockets. Like, there's
Yeah.
very few opportunities for fans to not only connect with each other, but to connect and really kind of showcase their love. Like, it's one thing to go on Twitter and be like, "Hey, I love this movie." It's another to travel, to
Yeah.
go, to be able to spend time there and be like, "No, no, I actually, this is my favorite movie, or this is my favorite
Hmm.
character, or this is all these things." And so I think it's really powerful that we are just like, as humans, we are constantly wanting real. We are constantly wanting connection. We are constantly wanting a third place. And if you look at society right now, there's not as many comic book stores as there were like in the 1980s.
Hmm.
Where do people get to hang out? They're usually in digital third places that are becoming more and more commodified or more and more hate driven. And so like the normal people like, I used to love this, but now it's not a good place for me. And
Hmm.
so these spaces become really special for people because you know that you're going to be in like other people. You know, you're
Yeah.
going to get like, these are my people. These are people who
Yeah.
love this as much as me. That's a really powerful feeling. And it comes down to this just human need to belong.
Would love your perspective because one example that I also wanted to talk about was YC. They did an event at one of the stadiums in San Francisco, and they had Sam Altman and Jensen Huang of NVIDIA there as like headliners. But it seems as if the internet pretty much like deadpan, panned it, calling it, kind of lame, that it seems as if you're trying to bring everybody together just to charge them money when the whole point
Yep.
of YC is to, be exclusive. And then here you are
Yep.
trying to, bring everybody together of like the applicants that like didn't get in.
Uh-huh.
And then like the, general partner had to publicly defend, saying that their goal isn't scarcity when of course it is. um,
Yep.
and like, it was kind of showing that like, you can't just throw people into a room or an arena together and expect it to go well. So would love to know kind
No.
of like your thoughts behind that, because, there are ways to obviously do these events and show that you care about the people, which I think
Yeah.
is part of the problem of what YC didn't do, that they made it
Yeah.
more about themselves than about like the people.
Yeah.
But yeah, any other thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of work and research in like sociology, especially how sociology plays with community and trust and customer experience and all these things. And so it's fascinating to me, especially for that kind of community event. You're dealing with a lot of like identity theory, so like how people
Mm-hmm.
see themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
then you see these people who are usually kind of lifted on high as to like how, and they're separated from everyone else because of the work they do and their version of like what they think their technology is going to do in the world. But then you open it up to people and you have to decide like what are we really doing this for and who is it for?
Mm-hmm.
What is our goals for this? Because there tends to be an idea that community building is easy when it is exceptionally hard.
Yeah.
Exceptionally hard. It's one of the most difficult things. Like people who are, and also it's one thing to build for you, it's another to build for somebody else. Like you can build
Mm-hmm.
community for other people and it be successful, but if you build a community that works for you, it might be incredibly difficult, like say, almost impossible, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. And so what I think is interesting is if we look at community, we also have to look at the K-shaped economy and
Mm-hmm.
how it is switching things and how it is impacting us. Because what we're seeing is that community continues to be commodified.
Mm-hmm.
So their whole thing is like you just want people to pay for this. You just want, so what you're saying is you are now going from a place of scarcity where you had to like earn your way in because you were bright or brilliant, or you had this great idea, or you worked really hard, or you went to Stanford, or whatever the criteria was. And that went to, you know what, we'd actually just need anyone who can pay the right amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
So you went from an invitation to a country club real fast. And so what I find is very interesting is we keep commodifying things. I think a really great example of this is Coachella. And I think if
Mm-hmm.
you compare San Diego Comic-Con and the Fanatics Fest and then Coachella, I think that plays along with what the real is, because a lot of people, I have friends who've gone to Coachella the past few years, and every year they hate it more and more and more
Mm-hmm.
because it's become influencer fest. It's become the influencer Olympics. And so what they went there for, the experiential of the real, now just looks like a brand ad.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're experiencing stuff. It's real on paper, but it's commodified to the point where it does not do what they need it to do. And so they want to leave. And so I think it's fascinating that we continue to try to commodify community. We continue to try to think that we can just shove all these people in a room and it'll all work out and we'll do everything we need to do, when we have completely forgotten what we need community for. Like YC has done a really great job with their community building because of how they set it up. Because if you're in there, for better or for worse, you are peers,
Mm-hmm.
you are founders, you are creators, you are entrepreneurs. And so by turning it into something that is accessed by pay instead of accessed by criteria, you've shown that it has nothing to, like, you don't earn a spot anymore. You pay for a spot. And that completely changes how people see that community because you've changed the table stakes, but you want the members of the community to treat it exactly the same way. It's not. If you switch the norms, it's going to switch the behaviors of the humans in that system. And I don't think people realize that, especially people who don't do community work.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting, this whole idea of like changing the identity makes the people that were originally like hardcore fans feel like,
Yep.
oh, this isn't
Yeah,
really for
we're
me
not the chosen
anymore.
ones anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's identity
And how
theory.
easy it
Yeah.
is to lose that, right?
Yep.
But also, I do want to like call it because I feel like maybe like even 5 years ago, Comic-Con felt like it was starting to lose its status because like it wasn't the place that all these, companies had to go announce their thing at, right?
Yep. Hmm.
It kind of started spreading. Like Disney started having their own thing, and once like Disney did, I think Marvel did on its own, like
Yep.
the what we originally started talking about, right? The one with the seats. And somehow they managed to pull it back, right? Because this one actually felt like an event again that like
Yeah.
you had to be at, right? Where it's
Yep.
like all these announcements were happening. And maybe that is, a testament to the fact that like Marvel and like Disney are losing their own standing and felt like, hey, we need to kind of go back into the fold of Comic-Con in
Yep.
order to get people hyped up again because what we were doing by ourselves isn't as effective anymore because they kind of
Yep.
like, washed out their own brand with all these like, remakes and, redos and everything. And so like going back into the fold with Comic-Con actually made sense and has now elevated them once again. And they had enough like new exciting things to announce that
Hmm.
made it worth it for them to be at Comic-Con and get people like hyped up. But also I think part of it is like what I mentioned, like the Ringer, they had a couple of panels. So it's like really going back to like the actual communities of people that are in it, right? That are like
Yes.
hardcore devotees of like the IP and the brands. And then
Yeah.
having those like bring in their
Yeah.
audiences as well. So
Hmm.
it's like you're kind
Yeah.
of creating concentric circles about like we have the brands, but then we also have like the people that are building their own communities that are around those like brands, and then like the fans and audiences themselves. So it's like you have layers of like access that you're giving to people, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
fine, you might not meet like Ryan Gosling, but you might meet, Mallory Rubin or like Joe, from like the Ringer because they're
Yeah.
there and they're like huge
Yeah.
fans and like you're fans
Yeah.
of them. So I
Yeah.
think like that's another thing to like think about here. It's like, how are you kind of having those like levels of like
Yeah.
entertainment for people that like you're not, giving them the A-list stars, but you're giving them some
Yeah.
access that makes them feel special and makes them feel as if it's worth it for them to pay for access to these events.
Yeah. Well, there's also lots of stories of like the famous people that are there going incognito in costume so they can walk
Hmm.
around. So like Ryan Reynolds before he crashed the Marvel thing in his like
Mm.
gray jean Deadpool thing, he specifically was there. And it showed a video of him like
Hmm.
walking the halls and walking through Comic-Con, taking pictures with fans. They just
Hmm.
didn't necessarily know it was
No, it was
him.
him.
And then, I mean, but there's tons of stories of people doing that. So I think it's a huge opportunity to like you might be mingling and meeting celebrities that you may not know of, but you also get to meet like really cool people and just
Hmm.
I think the other thing too that kind of gets lost is there was is all of the cosplay that's done there, also like
Hmm.
the stuff like the proper cosplay at San Diego Comic-Con. A lot of those people have been doing they've been working on those costumes for like a year. Like they are
Hmm.
handmade, they're going
Yeah.
out for contests, like they're absolutely and some of them are like really highly like obviously well known, but some of them are like very much a deep cut. And so
Yeah.
I think once again, craft, like there's a lot of artists there, there's a lot of really cool
Hmm.
people that go there. And so it's a really great place to connect and see it. It's a celebration of like all this art, all these things that have come to life. I
Hmm.
think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so a couple lessons from me. You can't manufacture devotion. I think by having like the hardcore fans who do go all out and then rewarding that is gonna like
Mhm.
always repay because you want to, give back to like your hardcore of hardcore fans, right? Like
Yep,
I feel like
reciprocity.
sometimes a lot of companies miss that. They just, anybody that like wants to pay for a ticket should get in. It's like kind of, we're
Yeah.
seeing that, right, with the commodification of Coachella, the World Cup, Super Bowl, right? It's like I think people are starting to realize that like, oh, influencers are getting into like these,
Yeah.
into these events, but not like the real, true blue fans, right? And
Yeah.
so when you start changing the dynamic, people kind of get a little more jaded about
Yeah.
being a fan, and they're
Yeah.
not as excited to participate with you because they're like, well, I'm
Yeah.
not even going to get rewarded anyway. But this
Yeah.
influencer who has, but doesn't actually care about the
Yeah.
sport or the property or the
Yeah.
IP is getting rewarded. Like, how is that
Yep.
anything?
Yeah.
So something for companies to think about, and then also that like authenticity still matters so much. The fact that you can get Ryan Gosling and Ryan Reynolds and then all these athletes and Jay-Z to show up at these events throws back light onto these events and shows like we're
Yeah.
actually the real deal. We know what will get them to come out, right, to actually be with the fans, but then we also know what the fans want. So having that like meld of like both, and then also mixing in like the enough interest from like podcast hosts and reporters and other people that are like kind of like the middleman, the glue that kind of gives you the insights. The fact that they did bring Josh Horowitz to help announce Ghost Rider, who had like had that initial conversation with Ryan Gosling and Kevin Feige, like
Yeah.
shows that like we're rewarding the people that know, A, but
Yeah.
then B, also showing you that like we know we are also fans of the property
Yeah.
ourselves and are like bringing it back to all these things, which also kind of goes back to like what we were saying about Zendaya and, how she's putting in the little Easter eggs to, in like her outfits, but then how that's become its own like marketing thing. So what are these things that you can be plugging away at and like finding like those little hooks for your audience to show that you're paying attention to them? Because isn't that what any of us want, especially as like a hardcore diehard fan, is to
Yeah.
feel as if you're paying attention to me because I am paying attention to you?
Yep. I think Disney, I will say this for Marvel. I know I've talked a lot of trash about them on this
Yeah.
podcast so far, but I do love them. But I do think they do a good job with creators. I think
Hmm.
they've done a really good job with finding out like who are the creators that people talk to. Josh is a great example, but also like Straw Hat Goofy. They've had him do a lot of like red carpet interviews and stuff because he breaks down a lot of the Marvel movies. So I think there's
Hmm.
opportunities there. I think it's been very cool to see like how they've not like it's not just an influencer, it's someone who clearly knows their stuff
Hmm.
and then they will put them out there. I think that's been quite lovely to see is that they definitely looked for people who like you're not just popular, you know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
Like, would you be interested in doing like this kind of stuff? So I think there's definitely an interest there. That's well done. I love that you mentioned giving back. I think reciprocity is such an underrated concept in fandom and brandom. And brands want that love and devotion, but they don't do anything to feed it
Hmm.
and they take it for granted a lot of the time. And so I think for the longest time, and it's not just a Marvel problem or a DC problem, there's been a lot of taking the fan for granted and thinking that you can give a subpar story and that they
Hmm.
will just gobble it up and not critique it because you're protected because they love you.
Hmm.
And then there's been so much backlash over the past like 5, 6 years because not all the projects, but some of the projects have not been good. And so it's like,
Hmm.
how do we navigate the general critiques that are valid and then the critiques that are just toxic fans that are making a living by being creators that just spew hatred about things they don't like. So I think there's definitely it's hard to navigate, but I
Hmm.
think it's definitely interesting for anyone that's either trying to instill fandom and brand them with the brand that they work with or if they're trying to understand it at all. It's definitely a fascinating subject.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll throw in one last one because what you were talking about reminded me that your event shouldn't contradict your brand identity, right? That was
Nope.
part of what was the problem with YC, right? Which is known for being selective,
Yep.
being that like harder to get into than Harvard, right?
Yeah.
And then when they opened up, the floodgates to more people, their hardcore audience was like, meh, maybe not. Maybe this isn't
Yep.
like what I want. So you have to kind of, still try to fit with the brand identity of the folks that have been there since day one and that expect it to be a certain thing. And then if you are wanting it to open up wider, like maybe, find a way to like try to make that work in a way that doesn't offend or
Yeah.
detract from like the the OG enthusiasts.
Yeah. Well, I think they could have done it with what they did. I think they could have done it as a one-off to say, like,
Mm,
this is this massive thing that's a ticketed event that anyone is welcome. And then because you were a member of YC, we're going to have a completely separate by invitation event for like the
mhm,
first 100 to RSVP or whatever. And you get to
mhm,
ask questions direct. Like you can absolutely have your cake and eat it too, but you
mhm.
do have to offer that understanding of this is this person's identity. This is how they associate with us. This is how we need to handle that relationship instead of rejecting it.
Agree.
Yes.